The rain hammered against the reinforced glass of the control tower like bullets from heaven, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller fragments that obscured our view of the runway. Hurricane Delilah was supposed to make landfall in 6 hours, but she'd accelerated overnight, her fury now bearing down on Langley Air Force Base with the wrath of nature unleashed. All aircraft grounded until further notice. Colonel Marcus Hayes barked into his headset, his weathered face etched with the kind of concern that comes from 30 years of military service. I repeat, all aircraft are to remain secured in their hangars. I stood in the back corner of the control room, invisible as always, clutching my tablet with the latest weather data. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez, that's my name, though most people here just call me the weather girl when they think I can't hear. At 28, I was the youngest meteorological officer ever assigned to an F-22 Raptor squadron, and the only woman. A fact that hadn't gone unnoticed or uncommented upon during my 18 months at Langley. "Sir," I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the storm preparation. "I need to show you something." Colonel Hayes barely glanced in my direction. "Not now, Vasquez. We've got bigger problems than your weather charts." The dismissal stung, but I'd grown used to it. Ever since I'd been transferred from the Pentagon's Strategic Weather Division, I'd been fighting an uphill battle for respect. It didn't matter that I'd graduated summa cum laude from the Air Force Academy, or that I'd published 3 papers on severe weather prediction that had revolutionized military flight planning. What mattered, apparently, was that I was 5'4", weighed 115 pounds, and had the audacity to think I understood aviation better than men who'd been flying since before I was born. "Colonel," I tried again, my voice firmer now. "The storms. I is going to pass directly over us in exactly 47 minutes. We'll have a window, maybe 20 minutes of calm, but only if we act now." This time he looked at me, his gray eyes sharp with irritation. "A window for what, Lieutenant Commander?" I took a breath, knowing what I was about to say would sound insane. "There's an F-22 stuck at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, mechanical. Failure grounded it yesterday, but they've fixed it. The pilot's ready to fly, but they can't get airborne. The storm's too strong down there. So they wait it out like everyone else," Hayes said, turning back to his screens. "They can't." I pulled up the classified information on my tablet, the data I'd been analyzing for the past 3 hours, while everyone else focused on battening down the hatches. That aircraft is carrying the prototype guidance system for the next generation missile defense network. If the storm surge hits MacDill, and my models show it, well, that hangar will flood. The system will be destroyed, along with 18 months of development and $47 million of taxpayer money. The control room fell silent except for the howling wind outside. Major Rebecca Chun, the only other woman in the room, and one of the few people who'd ever taken me seriously, looked up from her station. "What are you suggesting, Elena?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, every time someone had suggested I'd be better suited for a desk job in D.C. "I'm suggesting we go get it." Colonel Hayes laughed, actually laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "We?" "Lieutenant Commander, I don't know what fantasy you've been cooking up in that pretty head of yours, but I'm a pilot." The words came out harder than I'd intended, cutting through his condescension like a blade. "I'm instrument rated in the F-22, F-35, and F-16. I've got over 200 hours in the Raptor, and I've flown in conditions that would ground most of your guys." The silence stretched longer this time. Captain Michael "Torch" Rodriguez, the squadron's top pilot, shifted uncomfortably near the window. I could see the conflict in his face. He knew my qualifications were real, but admitting it meant acknowledging something the boys' club had been denying for over a year. "Flying weather reconnaissance drones through storms is not the same as," Hayes began. "I've never flown a drone in my life," I interrupted, my patience finally snapping. "Every flight I've logged has been an actual aircraft, in actual weather, gathering actual data that's kept actual pilots alive, including some of the men in this room. Major Chun stood slowly, her dark eyes moving between me and the colonel. Ellen's right about the window. I'm seeing the same data on my screens. The eye will pass over us, and if someone could thread the needle launch during our calm period, fly along the eye wall to Tampa, and return before the back end of the storm hits, it's theoretically possible. Theoretically, Hayes repeated. Do you have any idea what the wind shears are like in the eye wall of a Category 4 hurricane? The turbulence would tear an aircraft apart. I pulled up another screen on my tablet, showing the 3D atmospheric model I'd been building all morning. Not if you know exactly where to fly. The eye wall isn't uniform. There are channels of relatively stable air, paths where the wind patterns create corridors of reduced turbulence. I've mapped them. How? This came from Captain Rodriguez, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. Weather balloon data, satellite imagery, atmospheric pressure readings, and mathematical modeling based on fluid dynamics principles. I swiped through screen after screen of data, calculations that had taken me most of the night to complete. I know exactly where every wind shear, every downdraft, every pocket of clear air will be for the next 3 hours. Hayes stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing options. The money was significant, but more than that, the prototype system represented a strategic advantage that couldn't be easily replaced. Still, the risk. Even if I believed you could navigate the storm, he said finally, I can't authorize a pilot to fly into a hurricane. The liability alone. Then don't authorize it. The words came out before I could stop them, and I saw Major Chun's eyes widen with alarm. I volunteer. Solo mission, my call, my responsibility. Absolutely not. Why? I stepped closer to his desk, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Because I'm not good enough. Because I don't have the experience. Or because I'm a woman? The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Colonel Hayes's jaw tightened, and I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. How to refuse without appearing discriminatory. How to maintain authority without looking unreasonable. How to protect his career while doing what was right for the mission. Because, he said slowly, if something goes wrong, I'm the one who has to call your family and explain why I sent their daughter into a hurricane. The words hit me unexpectedly hard, reminding me of my father's funeral 2 years ago. Lieutenant Colonel Miguel Vasquez, killed in a training accident that should never have happened. My mother's face as they handed her the folded flag. The way she'd looked at me afterward, as if seeing him in my uniform was both a comfort and a torture. My family knows who I am, I said quietly. They know what I've sworn to do. And they know I'm the best person for this mission. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the empty runway in stark white relief. The wind was approaching its peak intensity, and I knew my window was shrinking with every minute we debated. Show me, Hayes said suddenly. Sir? Show me. Your flight path. Every waypoint, every altitude change, every contingency. If you can convince me you've thought this through, really thought it through, then maybe I'll consider it. I moved to the large display screen at the front of the room, my hands shaking slightly as I interfaced my tablet with the system. The 3D map of the storm appeared, a massive spiral of destruction with its calm eye moving inexorably toward our position. Launch window opens in 38 minutes, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'll take off during the eye passage, climb to 35,000 feet, and follow this corridor. I traced a line along the eastern edge of the eye wall, south-southwest toward Tampa. Flight time to MacDill, 80 minutes. What about the aircraft? Major Chun asked. How do you plan to get it airborne in hurricane conditions? The eye will reach MacDill approximately 12 minutes after it passes us. I'll have a brief window to coordinate the takeoff, then escort the other aircraft back along the same route. I highlighted the return path, showing how we'd thread between two massive storm cells. Total mission time, 54 minutes. Well, within our safety margin. Captain Rodriguez had moved closer to the screen, studying my projected route with professional interest. What's your backup if the timing shifts? If the eye moves faster or slower than predicted? I switched to a secondary display showing multiple scenarios. I've modeled 17 different contingencies. If the eye accelerates, I abort the mission and return immediately. If it slows, I have alternate holding patterns here and here. I pointed to two areas of relative stability, where I can wait for the window to reopen. And if the eye collapses? Hayes asked. If the storm intensifies while you're in the air, then I die. The words came out matter-of-factly, and I saw several people in the room flinch. But the mission continues. The pilot at MacDill will have his orders and his route. The prototype will be saved. Hayes studied my face for a long moment, searching for something, doubt perhaps, or fear that might give him reason to refuse. But I'd faced those demons already during my long night of calculations. I'd weighed the risks against the mission. Requirements, personal cost against strategic value. This was what I'd trained for, what I'd dreamed of since I was 12 years old and first saw the Thunderbirds perform at an air show in Colorado Springs. The F-22's never been tested in conditions like this, he said quietly. No, sir. But it's the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. If any plane can handle it, the Raptor can. And you really think you can fly it better than my experienced pilots? The question was a trap, and we both knew it. Answer yes, and I sound arrogant. Answer no, and I undermine my own argument. Instead, I chose honesty. I think I know this storm better than anyone else in the world. I've spent 14 hours analyzing every air current, every pressure gradient, every variable that will affect flight characteristics. Your pilots are better than me in normal conditions, sir. But these aren't normal conditions. The room fell silent again, save for the storm's fury outside. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the skepticism and curiosity and outright disbelief of a dozen experienced aviators. Major Chun caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod of encouragement. Finally, Hayes spoke. Pre-flight in 15 minutes. If there are any problems at all, you abort immediately. Understood? Understood, sir. And Vasquez? He waited until I met his eyes. Don't make me regret this. The hangar buzzed with frantic activity as the ground crew prepared my aircraft. F-22, a tail number 054087, a machine worth $150 million, and representing the pinnacle of American aerospace engineering. She was beautiful in the way that only instruments of war can be sleek. Predatory, built for a single purpose with no compromises. Chief Master Sergeant Davis, a 26-year veteran who'd prepped fighters for 3 wars, supervised every detail personally. She's got full fuel, all systems green, he shouted over the wind noise as technicians made final checks. Weather radar's been calibrated for storm penetration, and I've loaded the extended range navigation package. I pulled on my flight suit. The same routine I'd performed hundreds of times, but with an edge of anticipation I'd never felt before. This wasn't a training flight or a routine patrol. This was the real thing, a mission that would either prove everything I'd claimed about my abilities or end with my name on a memorial wall. Major Chun appeared at my elbow, carrying my helmet and a thermos of coffee that smelled like heaven. Last chance to change your mind, she said, but there was no judgment in her voice. Not happening. I accepted the coffee gratefully, using the warmth to steady my hands. Besides, who else is going to fly into a hurricane and live to complain? About the turbulence? She laughed despite herself. Elena, I want you to know what you're doing today. It matters. Not just the mission, but what it represents. There are girls all over the country who need to see that women can do this job. I'm not doing it to make a statement, Becca. I know. But that doesn't mean the statement won't be made. Chief Davis approached with my final briefing materials. Lieutenant Commander, I've been working on Raptors since they first rolled off the production line. This bird is solid, but she's never seen anything like what you're about to put her through. Trust your instruments, trust your training, and if something feels wrong, eject and let the taxpayers eat the loss. I finished with a grin. I've got it, Chief. He nodded, but I could see the worry in his weathered features. Like everyone else, he'd probably never imagined watching a woman climb into a fighter jet bound for the heart of a hurricane. The pre-flight check took 12 minutes, every system, every connection, every possible failure point examined and verified. The F-22's computer ran its own diagnostics, displays showing green across the board. Outside, the eye of the hurricane was approaching, the howling wind beginning to diminish as we entered the calm center of the storm. Control, this is Storm Rider requesting final weather update. Major Chun's voice crackled through my headset. Storm Rider, you have 17 minutes of eye conditions remaining. MacDill reports winds dropping below operational limits in 9 minutes. Copy that, Control. Beginning engine startup sequence. The twin Pratt & Whitney F-119 engines spooled up with their characteristic whine. 35,000 pounds of thrust per engine, waiting to carry me into the storm. Around me, the hangar crew cleared the area as massive doors began their slow opening sequence. And then I saw it, or rather, I saw the absence of it. Where moments before there had been horizontal rain and debris flying past the hangar opening, now there was an eerie calm. Gray light filtered down from above, revealing the eye of Hurricane Delilah in all its surreal majesty. The walls of the eye rose around us like a circular mountain range made of clouds, towering 50,000 feet into the sky. Lightning flickered constantly within those walls, illuminating their churning surfaces from within. It was beautiful and terrifying, nature's power made visible on a scale that dwarfed human comprehension. Storm Rider, you are cleared for takeoff. Weather window is optimal. I rolled out of the hangar and onto the runway, the F-22 responding to every input with precision that still amazed me after all these hours of flight time. The calm within the eye was perfect. No wind, no turbulence, just the steady rumble of my engines and the sound of my own breathing in the oxygen mask. Control, this is Storm Rider rolling for takeoff. Godspeed, Elena. I pushed the throttles forward and felt 70,000 pounds of thrust slam me back into my seat. The runway flashed beneath me as the F-22 accelerated, airspeed climbing rapidly through rotation speed. At 180 knots, I pulled back on the stick and felt the aircraft leap into the air with eager grace. The ascent through the eye was like climbing through a circular tube of calm, air surrounded by walls of destruction. Lightning continued to flicker in the storm walls, and I could see debris pieces of buildings, trees, things I couldn't identify spinning within the hurricane circulation. My aircraft felt solid and sure beneath me. Every system functioning perfectly. At 35,000 feet, I leveled off and began my turn toward Tampa. This was the moment of truth. The transition from the eye's calm into the relative stability of the corridors I'd mapped through the eye wall. My weather radar painted the storm structure in vivid detail, showing the channels of smoother air threading between the worst turbulence. Control, Storm Rider is entering the eye wall. Switching to tactical frequency. Copy, Storm Rider. We'll be listening. The first turbulence hit like a freight train. Despite my preparation, despite knowing exactly what to expect, the sudden violence of the wind shear nearly tore the controls from my hands. The F-22 bucked and rolled, altitude fluctuating wildly as competing air currents grabbed at the aircraft, but my calculations held. The corridor of stable air was exactly where I'd predicted, a river of relatively smooth flight cutting through the chaos. I adjusted course minutely, following the path I'd memorized down to the degree, and felt the turbulence ease. Flying through the eye wall was like navigating a three-dimensional maze of wind and rain. Updrafts tried to slam me into the storm's ceiling, while downdrafts threatened to crush me against the earth. Crosswinds sheared from all directions, requiring constant corrections to maintain heading and altitude. The radar was my lifeline, painting a real-time picture of the atmospheric structure around me. Every few seconds I made tiny adjustments, following the channels of stable air with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. 1 degree off course would put me into wind shears that could exceed the F-22 structural limits. 2 degrees might throw me into a downdraft powerful enough to drive me into the ocean. But I held the course, my hands steady on the controls, my mind processing the constant stream of weather data and flight information. This was what I'd trained for, not just the mechanical skills of flying, but the intellectual challenge of reading the sky like others read books, understanding the invisible forces that shaped flight, and using that knowledge to go where others COULDN, single quotes T.17 minutes. After entering the eye wall, I broke through into the clear air on the southern side of the storm. Tampa Bay spread out below me, unusually calm in the brief respite before the hurricane's backside arrived. MacDill Air Force Base appeared on my radar, its runway just visible through the haze. MacDill Tower, this is Storm Rider inbound with recovery mission authorization, Tango 7 Alpha. Storm Rider, MacDill Tower, we have been expecting you. Hurricane conditions ceased 4 minutes ago. Recovery aircraft is standing by. I could see it as I descended toward the airfield, another F-22, identical to mine, except for the tail number, waiting at the end of the runway with engines already spooled up. The pilot had clearly been briefed and was ready to go. The landing was smooth despite the gusty conditions, and I taxied quickly toward the waiting aircraft. Through my canopy, I could see the other pilot, a woman, I realized with surprise. Captain Sarah Mitchell, according to my briefing materials, though I'd somehow missed that detail in my pre-flight preparation. We exchanged brief hand signals through our canopies, thumbs up. Ready to go, follow me, and I began my takeoff roll. Almost immediately, the eye was already moving past MacDill, and our window for departure was shrinking rapidly. Both F-22s lifted off within seconds of each other, climbing quickly toward the eye wall on the storm's western side. Now I had an additional challenge, not just navigating the hurricane myself, but leading another pilot through conditions she'd never experienced. Recovery lead, this is Recovery 2. Captain Mitchell's voice was steady in my headset. I'm seeing some impressive weather radar returns ahead of us. Copy, Recovery 2. Stay tight on my 6 and follow my exact flight path. Do not deviate. For any reason, the corridors are narrow and unforgiving. Understood, lead. I'm with you. We entered the eye wall again, this time from the south, and immediately encountered the worst turbulence of the flight. With 2 aircraft to manage instead of 1, every wind shear and downdraft became exponentially more dangerous. I had to maintain not just my own position within the stable air corridors, but ensure that Mitchell could follow without losing control. The F-22 behind me disappeared and reappeared in the storm, visible one moment as a gray shadow in my mirrors, gone. The next as rain and cloud obscured everything beyond 50 feet. I maintained constant radio contact, calling out every course change and altitude adjustment, building a verbal map of our path through the hurricane. Recovery 2, descending to flight level 320, turning left to heading 045. Copy, lead, descending. And turning. Moderate turbulence ahead, maintain formation integrity. With you, lead. Halfway through the eye wall, my worst fear materialized. A previously stable air corridor suddenly collapsed as the storm's internal dynamics shifted, creating a massive downdraft directly in our flight path. The F-22 dropped like a stone, altitude unwinding rapidly as I fought to regain control. Recovery. 2. Emergency descent. Follow me down and prepare for severe turbulence. Both aircraft plummeted through 8,000 feet of altitude in less than 30 seconds. The wind shear so violent that I could feel the airframe groaning under the stress. My instruments flickered as electrical systems fought to compensate for the extreme conditions, and I briefly wondered if I'd finally pushed too far. But the F-22 held together, and so did Mitchell's aircraft behind me. We bottomed out at 18,000 feet and began climbing again, following a new corridor that had opened up as the storm continued to evolve. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system as the full magnitude of what we'd just survived began. To register, recovery lead. That was educational, Mitchell said, her voice carrying just a hint of strain. Welcome to hurricane flying, too. The worst is behind us now. And it was. The final approach to Langley took us through the dissipating northern edge of the eye wall, where the winds were weakening and the structure was beginning to break down. As we broke through into clear air above Virginia, I could see the base below us, its runways lit against the approaching darkness. Langley Tower, recovery lead requesting priority landing clearance for 2 aircraft. Recovery lead, Langley Tower. You are cleared for immediate approach, runway 03. Emergency crews are standing by as a precaution. The landing was almost anticlimactic after everything we'd been through. Both F-22s touched down smoothly and taxied toward the hangars where ground crews waited to secure the aircraft. As I shut down the engines and ran through my post-flight checklist, I realized my hands had finally stopped shaking. The canopy opened with a soft hiss, and the first thing I heard was applause. The entire ground crew, along with what seemed like half the base personnel, had gathered to watch our return. Colonel Hayes stood at the front of the crowd, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief and something that might have been pride. I climbed down from the cockpit on legs that were steadier than I'd expected, pulling off my helmet as captain. Mitchell approached from her own aircraft. She was grinning broadly, her dark hair plastered to her head with sweat. That, she said, was the most insane flying I've ever experienced. And I used to test experimental aircraft for a living. Just another day at the office, I replied, though I couldn't keep the smile off my face. Colonel Hayes pushed through the crowd, his expression unreadable. For a moment I wondered if I was about to face a court-martial for unauthorized deviation from approved flight procedures. Instead, he held out his hand. Outstanding work, Lieutenant Commander, both of you. I shook his hand, feeling the calluses earned through decades of military service. Thank you, sir. The prototype? Secure and undamaged. You saved the taxpayers $47 million and preserved 18 months of development work. He paused, looking at both Mitchell and me. More importantly, you proved something today about what's possible when we stop limiting ourselves based on outdated assumptions. The crowd began to disperse as the post-flight routine took over debriefing sessions. Maintenance reports, the mundane paperwork had followed every mission. But as I walked toward the operations building, I caught sight of a small group of junior officers watching from near the hangar door. 3 women, all wearing flight suits, all looking at me with expressions I recognized. It was the same look I'd worn as a 12-year-old girl watching the Thunderbirds. The moment I decided that someday I would fly fighters too. The moment I'd stopped accepting other people's definitions of what was possible and started writing my own. Major Chun appeared at my side, still wearing her headset from the control tower. How does it feel to be the first person to fly an F-22 through a hurricane? I thought about the question as we walked, considering the hours of preparation, the moments of terror, the satisfaction of a mission accomplished against impossible odds. Like the beginning, I said finally, not the end. Because that's what today had really been about. Not proving that women could fly fighters, we'd been doing that for years. Not demonstrating that the F-22 could handle extreme weather, the aircraft had performed flawlessly. It was about refusing to accept limitations imposed by others, about pushing boundaries not for their own sake, but because the mission demanded it. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new storms to navigate, new people who would tell me what I couldn't do. But tonight, as Hurricane Delilah moved inland and began to weaken, I knew something had changed. Not just for me, but for everyone who had watched a woman climb into a fighter, jet and disappear into the heart of a hurricane. The storm had passed, but the winds of change were just beginning to blow. 6 months later, Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez would be selected to lead the Air Force's first all-weather tactical squadron, specializing in operations under extreme meteorological conditions. Captain Sarah Mitchell would become her deputy commander. Their unit would go on to conduct 17 successful missions in conditions previously considered unflyable, saving millions of dollars in equipment and countless lives in rescue operations. But that's another story.